Okay, so my name's Goodis. I'm a freelance fly fishing and landscape photographer here in Vancouver, British Columbia. This is the first installment in 2024 to the backstory. The backstory features one of my photographs that I'm proud of or that has been published a few times before. And I just talk a little bit about the backstory, how I made the photo, where I made the photo and when, and then the settings that I used, as well as the camera equipment that I used to make the photo. And hopefully that you can potentially learn a little bit out of these little backstories, and I'll try to keep them short. But this particular image features Joffre Lake, but it's actually not Joffre Lake, it's the Joffre Lake campsite. So this image is shot in 2021, so pretty much right in the pandemic. So it was August 3rd. And so I know that when you get there and you have clear skies, it's very possible that you're gonna see lots of stars and you're gonna see the Milky Way. And the idea behind this shot was to try to have the Milky Way above my little tent here and have the tent illuminated. So the only way to get that photo would have to be shooting in the in the night or pretty much in the middle of the night, looking at the Milky Way and seeing if it's lining up close enough to the tent. Hopefully you get the Milky Way and the tent, and the Milky Way is kind of like above the lake, but in this case, that's not what happened. So there are a few little tricks for this. I mean, one is just to go, set up, wait until it's dark, and you'll start seeing the stars, and then you can start seeing the Milky Way, although, it's pretty hard to see with your eyes, but you can. And then you can start taking photos, which is what I usually do, in the direction that I want the photo to be, and kind of hope to see the Milky Way in the photos. And a lot of times you will if you have done a little bit of research. And so some of the research that I use is an app called Photo Pills, which basically allows you to look at the location and the time of year right up to the day and the hour even, and it'll tell you where the Milky Way is in relation to the location that you're at. And so that gives you a little bit of planning and preparation that you can do beforehand. But then again, you pretty much just have to go there and and hopefully you can get the photo that you want, that you see in your head. This one's pretty close. So as you can see, I have my little mech tent, and the Milky Way is right above it with all the stars. And again, you'll see like all the meteors, shooting stars there as well. So I will say, like, with this shot, the preparation goes into it. Then there's a lot of kind of luck, hopefully that the Milky Way is above the tent and kind of lining up the way you want it. And then I usually try to do these photos in a single shot, which means that there's no blending, like there's no second shot for the stars and then one shot for the foreground, the tent, and you blend them together. I like to get them in one shot so that there's really minimal editing involved. It's basically really what you're seeing at the time. But what's also really cool is that these modern digital cameras allow for you to basically see at night. And I even use like a fairly old one, but what you need to do is a camera that gives you a very high ISO that is not so noisy, so that you can actually get these shots. So back in the day with film cameras and film speeds, you would try to go with the fastest film speed, which might be like ASA or ISO 1600 or 800, and then you would basically have your shutter speed basically as long as possible in order to allow light, which means that some of these shutter speeds would be maybe an hour potentially. And so of course all the stars would just be blurry or moving. The Milky Way would be moving, and there was options for like these star trackers, and that would kind of like keep your camera in line. But I'm just almost an impossible shot back then. And now with these modern digital cameras, we can up the ISO to a very high level, which makes the sensor even more sensitive, and allows you to have a lot faster shutter speeds in the given shot. So in this case, that's exactly what I did. I had a very high ISO, a very fast lens, and a tripod, because it is still going to be a fairly slow exposure. And I was able to get the one shot where you have stars that are tack sharp, not blurry at all. And that was the idea. That was what I wanted. So yeah, so that's basically it. I mean, so this shot, I walked up to Joffre. It's about a 6-kilometer kind of uphill hike. You set up your tent. You sort of have an idea as to where the Milky Way might be or the stars are going to be. And you wait till it gets dark, and then you start trying to get the shot. I used my cell phone, actually, the flashlight on the cell phone, to illuminate the tent. I used a tripod and a camera and a fast lens, and I shot a bunch of photos, and the camera and the image on the back of the camera actually shows more detail than what my eyes are seeing, and it tells me, or it shows me, I should say, where the Milky Way is. So I just waited a little bit as I shot, and the Milky Way started to move over, and then I got the photo that I wanted. So that was one night, and then at the end of the night, you sleep, you get the shot, you sleep, and then you enjoy the views in the morning, and you hike yourself back down. And the downside to the whole thing is that you do have to have all your camping gear and your photo gear and your tripod, and the weight of the backpack and all that can be quite heavy. But it's really worth it. It's awesome. Back then you could, you could just basically buy a day pass and get up there and do your camping and get the shot. So that's what I did. So that's the Milky Way over my little mech tent up at Joffre Lake. And so yeah, super cool. One of the shots that I've been wanting to get for a long time. I mean, I'd love to have it over the lake too, but that didn't happen. Didn't line up like that, but I still got a really cool shot. So the specs on this shot, well, maybe I'll talk about the gear that I used first, right? So the first thing that you need is you need a tripod. So this little Gitzo Traveler tripod, it's like a Series 1. It's a little ball head. It's about 2 pounds. And so when you're doing all your backpacking, you really want to have a tripod that's super light, because you have your tent, your food, your camera, all that stuff, and your backpack can get really heavy really quickly. So in this case, I had this little Traveler. It's like my backpacking, camping, backcountry tripod, although I am investing in lighter ones. This is still a little bit heavy, although 2 pounds seems not much, and it's a really good height. Obviously extends and you can get a full height, but yeah, this is the tripod I used. It's a really good one, but it's still a tad heavy, although it's one of the lighter options out there. So the cameras that I used, so in this case, I mean, I always use fairly old cameras. So this is the Nikon D750. So it's a full frame camera. I think it's got I'm pretty sure 24 megapixel sensor. What I do find with these full frame cameras is that they have a better high ISO, and also because the megapixels are a little lower, it just doesn't have the same noise that you'd see on like some of the high megapixel cameras. So it's a really good one for star shots or long exposure shots when you're dealing with really dark situations. I think it's about 10 years old. It's an old camera, but the beauty of this camera is that you can shoot at like ISO 8000 or 10,000, even 12,000, and have a really clean image. And that is the way to get a short shutter speed when you're dealing with stars. You have to have a very high ISO in order to shorten the shutter speed. Otherwise, you'd have a longer shutter speed, which means that as you go longer with the shutter speed, leave the shutter open longer, the stars will start to have movement and they will start to actually show trails as opposed to being tack sharp. So the high ISO is what you need, and usually with a wide angle lens, anything over 10 seconds or 15 seconds or 20 seconds maybe at the most will start showing some movement with the stars, right? And if you want star trails, it doesn't matter. You can just leave the camera open for a long time and have the trails. But if you want tack sharp stars, you need that faster shutter speed, right? And the only way to do that is to have a really fast lens and also a very high ISO capable camera. So that's the D750. That was the camera that I used. And the lens that I used was the Nikon 20mm, so 20mm prime. So it's quite wide, and it's a 1.8, f1.8. So it's a very fast lens. And so as an example, when you use a lens like this, you're able to increase the shutter speed by a couple of stops. If you had like an f4 lens, you'd lose a couple of stops of light, which would be actually a lot of time when you're using a fast shutter speed. You would end up, doubling your shutter speed, or just making the shutter speed really long, even though you don't want to, right? You'd have to bump the ISO up so high that it becomes really noisy. So all these cameras do have some limitations with the ISO, and I do find that this particular camera, the D750, has a pretty good ISO for an old camera. So I found that if I go about 12,000 ISO and above, I don't even think you can go much further than that, it does start to show a lot of noise. So I try to keep the ISO in that sort of 6,000 to 8,000 range, which is very high compared to some of my older cameras, which wouldn't even go that high. And that allows me for a faster shutter speed. So as an example, this particular image was shot at 20mm. It was shot at 6 seconds. Okay, so 6 seconds for the shutter speed. That's really fast for stars. It was shot at ISO 8000, right? And it was shot at f2. So I found that with this particular lens, f1.8 is a bit soft. f2 is really sharp. So the aperture being f2 just gives you a much sharper image. So I try to stop down to f2, still very fast. But I found that like even at 20mm and like a 6-second exposure, it's really fast. But as you start to go to like say 10 or 12 or 15 seconds, you start seeing some movement in the stars. So 6 seconds is really cool. So in this case, it's quite bright out there. The stars are really bright, and because I illuminated the tent, you can see all the shadow is the background super shadowed or just dark. But I was able to do a 6-second exposure to allow for a nice exposure on the tent and the stars, including doing one shot, but using that ISO 8000, which is kind of pushing the ISO with that camera. So that's basically how that shot works. Is you have to go there, you have to set up, you have to have a camera that's capable at a high ISO, a fast lens, and a tripod, and then you sort of have your vision. You can realize that vision, which is what I did here. Super cool. So that's basically it. I don't need to go any further than this on this particular video. I hope you enjoy the image. My website's up and updated now, so you can see prints and all that stuff at aarongoodisphoto.com. You can subscribe to this channel if you'd like these kinds of videos. I do plan to do more kind of on-location videos as well, and so maybe do some fly fishing stuff as well. So yeah, maybe stay tuned and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See ya.